Let's go ahead and get started with our first talk for tonight. It is by Ivan Nikolov, who is an assistant professor at Aalborg University in Denmark. His work focuses on combining computer graphics, human-computer interaction research, and VR, AR with deep learning and computer vision methodologies. His areas of interest currently are synthetic data and providing more interactive and immersive experiences through the use of generative models and LLMs. And he will be assisted by his student, Matthias Niebuhr, who is a master's. Make sure everybody's muted. Okay. He'll be assisted by his student, Matthias Niebuhr, who is a master's in science mediology student at Aalborg University, passionate about advancing digital learning using XR technologies and adaptive media systems with the incorporation of new technologies. He's developed various projects which have been related to digital learning and evaluating optimal user experiences. So, take it away, guys.
Thank you so much for the nice presentation here and for giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about our research. So, again, today I will be presenting some of my students' research, and we're going to be talking about how we can make VR games and VR experiences, especially for museums, more interactive and more immersive through the use of LLMs. So, the initial idea that we started with was, how can we make learning more engaging and help further the willingness of people, especially for younger adults, to learn better and learn more? Because, again, so sorry about that. Because many young people we've seen have problems with engagement for traditional teaching. So we wanted to know if we can help with that. From there, of course, one of the interesting parts was learning about history, and especially learning through curiosity and the use of natural languages. Because again, it is, especially when we talk about learning through games and through interactive experiences, these are one of the things that we want to focus especially about. And especially about visiting historical sites in VR, and as we are in Denmark, especially for virtual Viking guided tours and understanding a little bit more about Viking culture. Well, we saw that there are actually some problems with historical museums in Denmark. From 2023, there were some censuses that were given through museum goers to determine how interested they are. And what they saw is that one of the main things for museum goers was the lack of digital media, so video, sound, any kind of interactive experiences in VR, and exactly, lack of interactivity. These ones, sorry, they're in Danish, but more or less in this column here, it shows how different age groups perceive how interesting different parts in going to the museums are. And here we can see that especially for digital media and activities, the goers from 14 to 29 are showing much less interest. The same here with another national survey that showed that digital media with virtual reality, especially for young visitors, is problematic. So we went and looked at how we can combine. Traditionally, VR experiences are quite interesting and can help younger adults to be more interested in going to museums. But we wanted to extend the presence in the environment through introduction of historical social actors, so non-playable characters that a user can interact with. And of course, because large language models nowadays are everywhere, we wanted to see if we can actually leverage them. And this way we could build an experience that utilizes multimedia interaction. So the user's voice, later on we're going to say also different gestures, different emotions and so on, to make it a little bit more interactive and immersive. For that, we arranged going to one of the bigger historical museums in the North Jutland area in Denmark that is specifically directed towards Viking history and Viking rituals. Here we went, the students went and were shown all the different parts of the indoor and outdoor museum, and were shown that one of the more interesting parts of the museum, the burial grounds where a lot of these Viking rituals were made, were problematic for the museum, because what was shown that was that museum goers went there, looked at stuff, they were very interested in the moment, but then did not get a lot of the stuff, did not connect what they saw in the museum with the outdoor environment. So there was areas that we could make something better. With that, we decided to go and build 3 main scenes that are connected to these burial rituals. The first one was created through the museum exhibition, so representing the whole town of Lindholm. Then another one was in one of the houses of a deceased Viking that was again built based on museum exhibitions. And the third one was the possibility of users to actually participate in the burial rites for deceased Viking, to talk with his friends, understand a little bit more about them, understand a little bit more about the different rituals that were connected with that. And of course, we built these VR environments, but we wanted to populate them with these social actor non-playable characters that people can talk to. We had 3 non-playable characters that were part of the family of the deceased, and one that was more of a guide to us. They had so they reacted to the user's presence, followed the user, and had basic gesticulations, and they could speak. And we wanted to figure out if traditional dialogue version for these interactive VR experiences can be made better with some dynamic dialogue using large language models. So here I will give the word to Matthias to tell us a little bit more about this. Matthias, can you take over screen sharing, or should I stop?
I don't know if I've never tried taking over screen sharing on Zoom. But if it's easy, I'll do it.
I mean, you can just stop. I can stop sharing and you can continue.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. 2 seconds. So yes, I hope this works. Should be loading. Yes, you see it?
Yes, it's there.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah. So in order to implement this, we divided the workload into 3 categories in order to get these NPCs to come alive. So in first step, we have that the user speech audio stream from the computer is given to the Whisper AI API. This user speech then generates a transcribed text, which we then feed to ChatGPT 3.5 API. This will then give us like a text string in the response in the role of whatever NPC we have prompted it to answer as. This results then in a text answer, which we then feed to the Amazon Polly API, which will generate text speech in order to feed to the NPCs as if they are talking. In concerns of the user testing, we sampled with an age gap of from 14 to 29 years old, where the average recruited participant was 23 years of age in both conditions. We also had 14 participants per condition, 28 in total, where we had 8 males and 6 females in each condition. Our recruitment was based on purposive recruitment because we wanted this decide a target age group, which Ivan described in the start, of young people who are predominantly uninterested in museums. We wanted to measure the NPC interaction that the user had with the NPCs. So in order to do this, we did several things where amongst we did logging data, where we had the amount of prompts, which is the amount of times talking the users did to the NPCs, and we also had proxemics. We divided each NPCs into several zones around them, where we had the intimate zone here. You can see the red circle, personal space, social space, and then public space. Yeah, we couldn't really found out we couldn't use this too much later because we had the user being in a restricted environment. So, but it was very interesting to try this approach at least. We also logged the gauge percent the user had on individual NPCs, so we could see which one they interacted the most with, and if certain users didn't like looking at the NPCs, and then we could ask them why. For measuring presence, we wanted to measure social presence with the medium as social actor. Here amongst we asked questions such as, I perceived that I was in the presence of other people in the virtual world, and if they felt that the characters were watching them and were aware of their presence. We also had a virtual environment presence questionnaire, where we want to measure the user's sense of presence within the virtual environment. We did these 2 questionnaires because we wanted to discern what the user saw as troublesome for their immersion or their learning. Yeah, so here amongst we ask questions such as if the virtual environment felt like a real environment, and if the objects acted like real objects. Furthermore, we also wanted to measure the quality of the conversations the users had with the NPCs. In order to do this, we wanted to understand the user engagement and satisfaction from the users. We didn't got this really good conversation quality questionnaire from another student at AAU, Aalborg University, where they also looked at the effect of context-aware LLM-based NPCs. And here we just asked if the conversation was creative, and then and such as if the conversation made use of correct language, and then they had to use a Likert scale in order to scale in which order how much they were the NPCs were satisfying this criteria. For our results, we definitely saw that there were better social presence and virtual environment presence when using LLMs, with no change in the conversation quality. People looked at the LLM NPCs more though, and conversed with them for longer at a time. We can also see here that the average NPC prompts are slightly higher than the scripted version. And also we can see that the gauge percent on the guiding NPC is a bit higher. But yeah, mostly it's just small fragments of changes, but there were some outliers who really spend a lot of time and some spend a little bit of time. But we could see predominantly that people spend more energy in engaging in the LLM version. Yep. Now give the word to Ivan again. Oh, Ivan, you're muted.
Sorry. So what we found out from this was that users had shallow conversations, which was problematic. Users had problems finding out topics to talk to the NPC, so they found it very awkward to talk to them. And they felt that the NPCs or the social actors had lacked human-like qualities. So that was problematic. What we wanted to figure out is how we could boost some of these things. The first thing that we wanted to do is get away from transactional conversations that were, oh, I want to do something, so I'm talking to this NPC to figure out how to do something, and get more into a social-oriented conversation where we could talk more openly with the NPC for about different topics. The other thing that we wanted to figure out is how we can create a social actor that is more of an embodied conversational agent. So they would be able to do and understand gestures like emblems, illustrators, and manipulators to make the conversation flow better. And they would be able to demonstrate emotions so they can present the information in a more colorful way. So I think that is Matthias.
Oh, yes. It's just me a bit slow figuring out Zoom. I'm used to Teams. So yeah. Yeah. So in order to progress on this first version we had, we now wanted to incorporate gestures. So we needed to develop a gesture library. In order to do this, we did this in participatory design with the users, where we wanted to define the gesture library. This is because there is basically, from our research, we found out there is basically a universally used gesture library for some things, but it's very culturally dependent. So we wanted to understand our user groups' gestures and what their body language was. In order to do this, we incorporate methods by Nielsen et al. And Morris et al., where we wanted to define the functionalities that we wanted the gestures for, and then got participants to show the gestures to another participant in a preliminary test to confirm if these functions could be understood from the gestures. Our test setup consisted in having to test for these implements and illustrators, gestures, so to speak, where we had cards for each function. So we would have cards for like try greeting the other person, show gratitude, and show that you disagree, but they could only use gestures. So we had this cardboard blocking the view of the other participant that didn't know what these items were, and then they had to explain each item only using illustrators, which is gestures used to illustrate size and shape, which we often do when presenting. Emblems are gestures that are more complicated, where we know that if we make some sort of, they're very culturally dependent. So we know if we make some sort of gesture that is known within our country, it means this, but it will not be known in another country, so to speak. They're more complicated. So the results of this gesture test showed that we could discern a pattern of recognizability amongst our target group, where we could see that, for example, nodding is a very dominant sign of approval, and for disapproval, a head shake is very obvious. So the concept for this project was that we wanted to make a boat trip with the same NPC from the first experience, where you had to take a boat trip with this Eric NPC to the local market, where you had 10 points of interest on the way there to talk about with him. We also incorporated that, implemented that he could now express emotions, and we could also decide the intensity of said emotion based on the LLM that could understand syntax, and then we could discern keywords in the response from the LLM to discern which intensity they were happy, sad, or angry. Yeah, for implementing the ACA gestures, we took the gestures that were most understood from our gesture test and implement them here on the right, as you can see. But we also found out that the body language used by Eric, the NPC, is heavily affected by his personality. The emotions he felt, so to speak, affected chosen gestures, just like with us. And here we can see in this inspector of Unity where we can see some basic things about Eric's personality. So we can see that he's like generally happy, he likes a good laugh, and he is curious by nature. He has a talent that is fishing, and he's very social. So whatever you wrote here also heavily affected which gestures he used. The response is heavily, affected by given personality, as I said. In this version, we also wanted to incorporate the ability of users being able to speak their mother tongue to the user or to the NPCs. So we used the OpenAI API this time instead of using the Amazon Poly text-to-speech API, which can only do English mostly. We then just had to specify the language in the Whisper API script to make ChatGPT recognize Danish. The shortfall is though that there's only 0.126% of the total training of the voice models of OpenAI that are in Danish. So there was some shortcomings of how things were pronounced. For creating the syntax for ChatGPT, we had to create consensus syntax, which enabled us to run animations as gestures, facial expressions on the face of the NPC via blend values, and this was done by searching for keywords. So as you can see here, we in the middle we could tell that to the LLM that they are able to feel these 7 emotions. So happy, sad, angry, surprised, scared, disgust, and contempt. And then they would have to give a number within curly brackets to discern in which intensity they experienced this emotion. So here is a short schematic, so to speak, of how this worked. So we would have the ChatGPT generate response, search for the keyword, and then if it contained a keyword, we would then remove it. We would then play a set animation delay, but depending on where the keyword was in the conversation. So we could get a corresponding gesture played at when the NPC was wanting to use the gesture. Because if you don't have this some sort of synchronicity, it becomes very awkward to see someone pointing and then telling about, then having them tell about them pointing at something very later on in what they're saying. So we had to synchronize it somehow. For the user body language interpretation by the system, we could interpret static gestures from the users, such as, and also dynamic gestures. We could also interpret the gaze of where the user was looking. So if they were looking at Eric the NPC or around in the environment. And it's very sad. I actually had some GIFs here where you could see the different gestures you could do. But I can see they're not here when I press present. Oh yeah. For the test design, we wanted to do between groups testing. where we had a baseline version and a body language version. Oh wow, this really... I had 2 GIFs here also, but apparently they're not here when you press the present button. Okay. Yeah. And for the setup, we wanted the participant to feel a bit isolated to avoid the feeling of them being watched by us. And we also had this plank for passive haptic feedback they would have to sit on. And many participants actually mentioned this as a very immersing element. So this can be recommended to do. Yeah, for questionnaires, we wanted to measure social presence again. So here we had questions such as, again, if they concerned the NPCs as being in the presence, if they concerned the NPC as another person, and if they were present in the same world as them, and to what degree. The perceived individual experience of conversation quality questionnaire is also something we used. So we again could look at how well the conversations went in terms of how the user felt it went. Yeah, we also had another questionnaire, what makes a good conversation, where we again could look at other terms of conversation quality measurements in order to discern what made the conversation good and what made the conversation bad for users. So here we also had questions concerning the humoristics of the NPCs, and if it was a positive influence of them having some sense of humor, or it took away from the experience. We also had logged measures, where we in the baseline version can see we have total time 15 minutes 23 seconds and 15 minutes 18 seconds body language version. Not many differences can be discerned from here, where we can actually say something from it. But it was really nice to have, but it's to close out any potential technical issues. For questionnaires, we could see that the results from the questionnaires in the social presence, where the body language is more comprised, more people agreed that it was a good experience, where in the base condition, many had shifting experiences. Some didn't care that the NPC didn't use their body in the baseline version, and some really cared about it and thought it as really awkward. So there's also some individual subjectivity issues to be held accountable here in terms of what the users preferred. But we can generally see that the body language version was more consistent. Yeah, for gesture implementation, we in the future would lay more emphasis on solving problems such as having the delay on the speech, because many saw this as a very took them out of the experience a lot, and it was the most mentioned part, the delay. We also saw that the pointing and waving was basically the most used gestures, and we should have focused way more on just making this a more integral part of the system, because it created a lot of conversation. Emblems was not used that much. I think many people had the problem of discerning whether the NPC would understand it or not understand it. So for the future, you would have to make really good feedback for discerning if the NPC had tracked that you just did an emblem gesture. So many tried doing some gestures, but weren't sure if it detected it or not. For future works, just after finishing the last part of the project, OpenAI released the ChatGPT 4.0, which is a very good improvement of what we would want to do. It can tell information and discern information very well from images, and is very fast compared to the 3.5 version we used of ChatGPT. The average response time from the ChatGPT 4.0 is 320 milliseconds, which is similar to human response time, which compared to GPT 4 Turbo is 2 times faster, and you only have to do one API call instead of 3 because of the implementation they did with real-time audio processing. For the future, we also would want to expand the context awareness. So expand this knowledge tree of the NPCs because it creates more individual conversations and memorable conversations, which was also mentioned by many people when it could remember something from the start of the conversation, then backtrack to it in some clever way at the end of their journey. Also, we would want to expand the body language capability because many people thought this was a very good idea and was very nice to have it not only stare at you and talk like in the first project, but also having it be more human in terms of using body language. Yeah, and that was it.